Good morning. Thanks for coming. My name is Ian Solomon. I'm with Farmers and Families for Claverack. I'm going to be your host today, and I'm going to start by giving you a little bit of an overview for the events that we're going to do, and I'll be introducing the speakers. So, some of you are very familiar with this issue. We know many of you are just becoming aware of what's happening, and we hope to present you with some information today that will take you from the very beginning of the process all the way up through news as recent as this past week. Once we've given you some information, we'll explain how you can have a chance to have your opinion heard by the powers that be today while you're here. We do have a lot to get to, so I'm not going to spend too much time up here, but here's an idea of the format. We have a few special guests who have come to lend their support. We'll be saying a few words. Our State Senator Kathy Marchione is here, Assemblywoman Dee Dee Barrett. And we're also happy to welcome Ann Muller from Congressman Chris Gibson's office, who will read a letter from the Congressman. And while we're mentioning people, I'd also like to welcome and recognize Brian Kelly, who's the Director of Government Affairs for Senator Terry Gibson. And Brian's here to listen and learn, and as a show of the Senator's support. And we'd also like to thank John Perica from Greenport, Joyce Thompson from Taconic, Daniel McKay from the Preservation League of New York, Jimmy Guzzi from Livingston, and Don Moore from the Hudson Common Council. Then we'll get into our informational presentation. We'll hear from some people who are very involved in the day-to-day work on this process, can bring us all up to speed. We have Marion Matheson from the Milan Town Board, Haley Carlock from Scenic Hudson, and Will Yandick from the Livingston Town Board. Together, they'll provide an overview of what's happened, where we are now, and what to do next. Right after that, we'll have a panel up here to take some of your questions. Then we'll move on to one of the things that's really special about this meeting here today. You'll hear during the presentations about the importance of public comments in this process. The state has designed a process that really requires that comments from the public be used in formulating the approach to these projects. They are counting on people to weigh in and tell them how they'd like this to be carried out. So we have computers set up in the back of the room in both corners, and we have helpers back there standing by who have done this before, who have entered comments and helped people enter comments. You can write whatever you want. Our job here is to make sure that your voice is heard. So we encourage you to take advantage of this opportunity. So without further ado, I'd like to get started by introducing our Claverack Town Supervisor, Kippy Weigel.
Good morning, everyone. We're going to have a little horse here, but we're going to play it out as we can. Can everybody hear me? Thank you for coming. I really appreciate it, especially on a day like today. I see that means people are interested in something, so they're coming out. So anyway, I'd like to introduce the members of my town board that are here with me today. Brian Keeler, he's in the back somewhere. He's way in the back. Bill Gerlach, also in the back. Katie Cashin, over here. Stephen Hook is at the town hall for the town board office hours. He could not make it. He might come back later. We're all here today because this is an issue that doesn't just affect one or two people, but the entire town. As a town board, we're taking all the steps possible to make sure the state and the power companies know that we are against expansion. We recently passed a resolution expressing our opposition to the state using eminent domain to expand those power lines through the town of Claverack and other localities. We believe that there are other options for expansion of the expansion of the power lines, such as burying the lines, instead the above ground lines are alternate power sources. We are also supportive of the efforts of the Farmers and Families for Claverack, and I want to thank them for organizing this meeting and for their ongoing efforts to get this information out to the public on this issue. It's exactly these types of groups that we need in order to make the town's voices heard. And as a town board, we are 100% behind all those efforts. Again, let me say that, 100%. You are doing exactly the right thing by joining forces and working together with all the other groups formed in the issue in both Columbia County and Dutchess County. We need to continue to work together to make sure that the state knows that this is not just one town or a group of landowners that are concerned, but this project is about the entire Hudson Valley. We are looking forward to working with all my colleagues in other towns in the county and to make sure that our voices are heard. I encourage all of you to write letters to the Public Service Commission today and get your neighbors and friends and families to do the same. Again, thank you for coming, and I look forward to talking to you at the end of the program. I'm also encouraging all of you to contact me or any of our other town board members about this project or anything else you would like us to know about or have questions on, if we would. Personally, we are fighting a Goliath, but I see a hell of a lot of Davids in this audience. Thank you.
Thank you, Kip. Up next, we'd like to welcome Ann Muller, who's going to read a letter from our U.S. Congressman Chris Gibson.
Good morning. Thank you. Congressman Gibson regrets that he could not be with us today. He's out in the western part of the state district working on some other issues. But he did want to share with you a letter that he's written to Judge Preston back in January, as this is a problem that results in many of the counties that the congressman represents. So he writes, the proposed Marcy to Pleasant Valley power transmission line is an issue that I've been monitoring with great concern. The proposed line would run through significant areas of the 19th Congressional District. Many constituents have raised questions and concerns about the local impact of this project. Though I support upgrading our transmission capabilities for the benefits of all New Yorkers, I believe the PSC and the New York State Power Authority should examine all alternatives and scenarios with such buried cables to minimize the impact on constituents. It should also be represented through a full and transparent public comment process that addresses local concerns for these projected projects. The public comment in my district, as witnessed in many public hearings held throughout the town's impacts by these lines, are strong and clear that there is great concern on many levels. The impact to properties affected by these power lines can be significant, not only to property owners, but to the local economy. I request a comprehensive and fair review process to be completed as soon as possible. Thank you, Congressman Chris Gibson. This was submitted back in January, and I've left copies in the back for everyone to review. Thank you.
Thank you, Ann.
You're welcome.
Please give the congressman our thanks for his support. We're very fortunate to have our state senator Kathy Marchione here. We'd like to invite her up to say a few words.
Good morning. It's an honor for me to be here with all of you this morning. Thank you to the organizers of this event and to all of you for taking your time this morning to come out in such force. I'm thrilled to be here with my colleague Dee Dee Barrett in Congressman Gibson's office. You know, I serve 4 different counties, but Columbia County is the only county in my district that I serve in its entirety, and I wouldn't have it any other way. When I first was invited, I initially was asked to attend and listen to your comments, which I was thrilled to be able to do. And then I was asked if I would speak and listen, and I'm certainly glad to do that as well. In addition to speaking and sharing my thoughts, I'm really here to learn more. I want to hear from you about the proposed power line projects and how it could impact you, your families, your farms, your land, your property values, and our Columbia County community. As your representative at the State Senate, your voice, your opinions, your concerns are my top priority. I also want you to know that I too have real concerns. The physical, economical, and practical concerns, real questions about the proposed power line projects that impact on Columbia County and surrounding counties. We can't let Claverack or any community in Columbia County be treated like a speed bump on New York's energy highway. That's unacceptable. I'm just one senator with one voice and one vote, but I will do everything in my power to prevent that from happening. Like you, I have real questions about the physical impact of high voltage lines, steel towers, and other energy transmission infrastructure, and how all that development could impact on this historic community and local scenic beauty. Like you, I have real concerns and questions about the economical impact of such a project on your community and on your property values, and the potential for misuse of eminent domain and the dangerous precedent that that sets. Like you, I have real questions about the practical impact of such a massive project and miles of high power transmission lines cutting across, cutting through multiple communities. I can't speak for the governor or folks downstate, but I know that Columbia County is more than just some lines on a map of New York State. It's a caring, concerned community of neighbors, families, and people with long, proud tradition of family farming, local commerce, and small town charm. It's your home. It's worth preserving, worth protecting, and worth fighting for. I have met with 2 of the 4 potential companies that have issued initial proposals for the power line projects. My direct questions to them focused on the project's impact, since early maps indicated that it cut across Columbia County. I asked what, if any, is the reciprocal benefit for Columbia County? In other words, what's in it for Columbia County? I asked for a detailed, specific listing of the impacts, physical, economical, and practical, from the proposed power line project. I also asked about using the latest technology, such as underground transmission lines, power lines that are buried, and unlike hanging lines and massive steel towers, have a much smaller footprint in impact on people and property. I know that I'm not alone in having these concerns. These concerns must be addressed. These concerns will be addressed. And the extra time that we've recently been afforded means more time for more answers. I will push the Public Service Commission and any company seeking to be part of the proposed power line project for answers in each of these areas. I want you all to know that I understand your concerns and the strong local opposition to the power line project. I know that the town of Claverack and many of the towns and county in Columbia County passed resolutions against this project, and that many residents in the town and county and nearby community showed up and spoke up and out from their hearts in opposition to this project. I want you to know that I am on your side and that I am elected to serve you. I am proud and truly honored to do so. I will continue fighting for you and representing your views. I will do my best not to allow Columbia County to be treated like some speed bump on the state's energy highway. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you, Senator. We're very happy you could make it. I've seen our next speaker at every informational event I've been to on this issue. She's very involved and committed to learning about and helping with this process. Please welcome Assemblywoman Dee Dee Barrett.
Good Good morning, and thank you all for being here. You know, over the past few months, I have been to my staff and I, a number of meetings and gatherings like this in the town of Clinton, in the town of Milan, in Livingston. We've met with the Public Service Commission. We've talked on several occasions with the governor's office, with his deputy energy secretary. We've continued to reach out, to learn, to educate ourselves, and to be able to be there for our constituents. But the bottom line is, we are a region that has flourished in the last few years despite the economic downturn because of our beautiful, beautiful landscapes, our view sheds, our farms. This has been one of the great success stories in the last years in New York State. This region and these power lines would do nothing but destroy them. And so it's been incredibly important that we continue to educate the PSC and the governor. And I think that we can feel that they are listening. I want you to know that despite the fact that the lines are down in the comment area for the Public Service Commission, I'm sitting right next to Pam Carter, who, Pam, you want to raise your hand, who's here from the PSC, and will happily, as she and Jim Den, her colleague, have been doing, answer questions and be responsive to you. We need to continue to let them know that this is not an acceptable option. As I sat in these meetings, I've listened to farmers and families who lost part of their land 3 generations back to the first power lines, and then the next generation lost land when the pipelines were put through, and now a 3rd generation is dealing with facing loss of farmland and having their property taken away by the government or destroyed or made unusable. And as Will Yannick has so eloquently said, nobody in this state wants to think that when they turn their air conditioning on, it's because somebody had to give up 15 acres of farmland. We are a state that cares about our farms, we care about our natural resources, we care about our region and our diversity. And I'm so happy to have Senator Marchione along with Senator Gibson as my allies in this, because my district seems to encompass most of this power line. I have Dutchess and Columbia County, and too many of my towns are going to be adversely affected. So we need to understand that we need to keep the power on, but the pressure on to get the power not to be in this way. And it's truly an opportunity for the community and for the public to make their feelings felt and make their own power felt in a way that will have a satisfactory impact on a decision that can be made. I think, you know, as the supervisor said, we feel like a lot of Davids against a Goliath, but together I think this is what government is truly all about. It's government of the people and by the people, and you are the people, and we need to help them understand that these are not acceptable choices, that we do not want power lines, monster power lines, 150-foot power lines, destroying our view sheds and our farms and our communities, and moving people out of their homes without their own choice. So it's an opportunity to make sure that government is responsive to us, and I thank you all for being part of that, and please continue to do that. Our office is ready. As I said, for months we've been working on this issue to be responsive, to help, to get answers to questions in any way we possibly can. So keep it on. Power to the people. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for all your work on this. I'd like to express our gratitude to everyone who just spoke. Knowing that we have the support of our elected officials makes all of this seem a lot more doable. So once again, thank you very much to everyone we just heard from. We're going to focus in a little more now on the subject at hand. I'd like to do that by reading a letter from my neighbors. These are the folks who live across the street from me on Webb Road. They have a tower, steel tower, that takes up about 1/3 of their front yard. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is John H. Delamater, and I have lived in Claverack all my life. My wife Barbara and I have lived at 96 Webb Road for 50 years. My history will show that previously my grandparents were residents of this house, and they raised 7 children there. My grandfather used the property to grow vegetables, put them on the back of his wagon, and with his horse would drive them into Hudson to sell them. One could say this was the beginning of the farmer's market. This was the sole income that they had, but he was able to put some of his children through college. My mother graduated from Hudson High School and then went to New Paltz, where she became a teacher in a one-room school. When the Power and Light Company came to ask my grandparents if they would be willing to sell some of their land so they could put the towers on her property, since money was very tight, she accepted the offer and took the money, as did many of the other people. After my grandmother passed, my mother became the sole inheritor of the property, and in turn, asked me if I would be interested in fixing it up to live there. My wife and I were very proud to be able to take on this project, although it took us a lot of work and money to restore it to some kind of decency. We have lived there for many years and raised our children there. We are so proud of our home, but not the horrible-looking towers that face us every single day. They are the worst-looking big monsters that we must see, and also our neighbors that have to look at them. All the neighbors that are on this street are of the same feeling. In keeping our places in a very respectable way, we feel very strongly that the addition of more towers will be detrimental to our property. We never thought that we would ever have the opportunity to express our opinion concerning these towers. We are very happy that we are now part of an organization, and we can now hopefully have a voice. We only have one wish, in that we can protect our property so that future generations will be free of these ugly towers that we have had to endure for so many years. Sincerely, John and Barbara Delamater. So finally now we'll get into some of the details of what's being proposed and what we can do. And to get that started, we'd like to welcome Marion Matheson from the Milan Town Board.
Well, I would first thank, and first tell me, is this like a working sound system for you guys? Yeah, cool, thank you. Mr. Supervisor, Dee Dee, Kathy, Mr. Gibson's office. You've made my job a little easier. I will not be repeating, you will be pleased to know, what they have already laid the foundation for. I would like to also thank all the elected officials who are involved today, because when I started a deep dive, and it was a very deep research dive on this 6 months ago, I could not get a return phone call or email return from any elected official anywhere for between 3 and 4 weeks. We have made a huge amount of progress. And it has been because the elected officials chose to listen, chose to line up, and chose to get educated and to embrace what the towns, what the residents and what the businesses can tell them. Thank you so much for becoming part of this coalition, our elected officials. We are deeply appreciative. I have today probably 2 goals. And I'm not going to actually go down to a really, truly boring detail level. I am here to answer questions afterwards. But what I really want to make sure that you get is the results of this deep dive research, and you get the benefits of that. So I want to do 2 things. First, I want to demystify for you a truly ridiculously complex mess. Now, our energy attorney, who's a superior human being, says that mess is a technical scientific term. So that's how we refer to this frequently, not always in public, you understand. Secondly, I want to touch your head and your heart in such a way that all of you choose to become involved in saving our way of life in the Hudson Valley. Now, that may sound a bit dramatic, but it actually isn't, because the economic impact has already started, and I'll explain why. There's the serious, dreadful situation of losing homes and land. There's also, of course, increased taxes. There's a whole lot of other really bad things. But as a result of this unknown mess out there called the power lines, what has happened is that people who were going to buy apartment buildings in Columbia County, And I had someone come to me this week to say, not doing it, can't do it, don't know what's happening. We had someone come to us saying, we were going to invest in a very large dining hall project for our educational institution. Off the charts, Sandy Williams, we adore Williams Lumber, you understand, down there in Dutchess County. Sorry, Sandy, no project. Now, I have many, many stories like this. You'll be very pleased to know I'm not going to tell you all of them. But the point is that this is not something that is out there. This is here and it's right now, and make no mistake. So if you think that simply because you are lucky enough, so to speak, not to have your property above the power line, you need to rethink this. And you need to hear what Kathy said and what Dee Dee said. If you love this country and you love what we've done, then please help us protect it. Now, I have spent most of the last 6 months trying to get to the facts. And I will tell you up front that because of the way that the PSC is managing this, and because of the process, there certainly are facts, but they change rapidly. And it isn't actually, you really have to listen up and you have to pay attention and you have to tie in, because things change very fast, literally from day to day. We were told in Milan, for example, by a PSC attorney in October, that there would be 2 applicants that would be coming down with their solutions down through Columbia and Dutchess County. And I said, gee, I'm not, are you really sure? Well, said the PSC attorney, yeah, because really, the PSC requires that all applicants come in and tell all affected towns, potentially, well in advance of filing their solution, so you got 2 today, so it's probably pretty safe to assume that there won't be anybody else. The next morning at 8:30, October 23rd, 2 hours before the first meeting with the judge managing this process, David Prestman, we got a call at Milan Town Hall from the 3rd applicant, who said, well, of course we sent this to you. And we said, well, no. And they said, well, of course you must have lost it. And our supervisor said, I think that this is not the right tone to set. That's how fast things change. So if you become frustrated because your elected officials or your grassroots groups or the leaders cannot answer every single question and it doesn't stay still, just understand this is moving. We can absolutely have impact. We already have. We'll talk about it. But you gotta check your facts, and you gotta check them 4 ways from Sunday, as my sainted grandmother said. All right. So the bottom line is, in 2013, Governor Cuomo, and the governor is sponsoring this project. Make no mistake. Governor Cuomo and the New York Public Service Commission, the PSC, proposed an energy project that, if it goes through, as proposed, you understand we're in process here, it will take our homes and land. It will destroy property values, and it has already started. Just ask your assessors. It will increase taxes because the PSC, the governor, and all the applicants are on record as saying that the costs will be passed on to the ratepayer. That's, guys, all of us here. It will also very seriously increase security and terrorism risks. I will tell you about that. It will injure businesses. At this point, I have counted up to 10 businesses that will be completely wiped out, only in Dutchess County. And there is this small matter of the increased health risks. This is not a pretty picture. It's definitely scary. Now, you might think that if the government in Albany is willing to cause such damage and make so many voters hopping mad, they must have done their homework. I mean, surely, right? You would be wrong. In fact, there is no clear proof that we need what is being proposed. None at all. In short, we have an expensive, destructive solution in search of a problem. Now, this is backwards, it's crazy, it's absurd, but it's real and moving fast, and as everybody has said, we must not put up with this. Okay, so if you take the tape back 2 years ago to Governor Cuomo's State of the State speech, that is the beginning of all of this commotion. I believe the term is mess. He began to talk about fixing New York's energy problems, specifically the need to get more electricity from upstate to downstate, read Manhattan and Long Island, and to fix the problems with the overall grid that carries our power. Now, we all agree that we want to fix aging infrastructure. We just want to do it right. The PSC, if we fast forward now to April of 2013, about a year and a half, the PSC requested what they call applications, think bids, for a new above-ground high-voltage transmission line to be installed along a 153-mile route. Yes, really, truly, 153 miles from Marcy in upstate New York to Pleasant Valley in Dutchess County. 4 companies responded. And those applications, responses to the PSC, were filed on October 1st. Milan became aware of this in September. And as a town, we're one of the towns who became involved very early on. And we are so proud to be working with the grassroots groups. This is really good news. But as we began to look at this, what became clear was that we had a very serious situation, and we were told that decisions were going to be made in January about all of this. So I did the deep dive. 4 applicants. 3 of them proposed to install the line, big honking transmission line, right down through Columbia and Dutchess. And they had a very simple solution. None of them stay inside the corridor. None. Not one single one chose to stay inside the corridor. All of them chose to take between 50 and 150 feet on their proposed solution on either side of the corridor, but they really couldn't say what because this was just an idea at this point, of course. So they would just take the land and then put in the big honking power line. I'm overplaying this, of course, but not by much. This corridor is also known as a right-of-way. So as you learn PSC language, it's quite exciting. So if you hear me say right-of-way, think big honking power lines coming down the corridor. This area today, we've passed under the power line several times just getting over here. The 4th applicant, a company called Boundless Energy, proposed a truly innovative and unusual solution on the west side of the Hudson River. And I'll be saying more about that later. I was asked to do that. Now, I'm going to use the word applicant to mean these 4 companies. I'm not going to go through all the names. I'm not going to give you a review of each one. The thing to bear in mind is 3 of them basically have the fundamental same solution. The 4th one has a very different solution with a different kind of technology. And I will answer indefinite amounts of detailed questions later, but I'm just not going to put you through that right now. Now these big honking power lines with land taken away from residents are going to be installed. Basically they're old technology, truly retrograde, truly antique, and we like antiques in Columbia and Dutchess County, but this is not acceptable. All right, this technology is susceptible to ice storms and hurricanes. Some of us have experience with that, with Irene and Sandy. And as my very good colleague and friend Greg Quinn says, I believe they haven't figured out yet how to stop the ice storms and the hurricanes. So, well, where's the creative thinking? I mean, where's the new technology? Where's the vision? Where are the underground solutions? If Europe, and I agree with you completely, if Europe and Manhattan can do it, surely New York State can do it. However, the PSC did not call for or want underground solutions. However, They have now changed their position, as some of you may know, thanks to much communication to them from some of the people in this audience. They now do want to think about underground. I believe that this is a critically important issue. We interviewed every single applicant. Every single applicant we asked, why not underground? Every single applicant, with the exception of Boundless, said, oh, well, it's too expensive. I said, no, let's go down one more level. Let's try that one more time. Too expensive as opposed to what? Too expensive relative to maintenance? No answers. The good news is the PSC has now said, oh yes, of course we're going to study underground. And I so hope, Pam Carter, that you can let us know when that will be happening. So, this lack of creative thinking, no planning, that's what I call strike one. To use an old baseball analogy. Old technology without a comprehensive vision. Now let's look at strike two. Eminent domain and serious financial injury to residents. We've really already talked about most of this. What I can tell, you've heard about it from everybody. It is real. There is no question. Every applicant has said, we prefer negotiation when we would ask them. But in the final analysis, if the PSC gives us the deal and we can't negotiate, we take your land. I said, well, gee, what do you pay people? And they said, fair market value. I said, that's cool. I said, and when do you determine what fair market value is? Well, a couple years from now. I said, isn't that an interesting and Machiavellian plan? That means that you will be able to take advantage of the decreased property values that you have caused all this problem for. I think that deserves full front and center on the New York Times. At which point people went, All right. So, the applicants really didn't know how to handle this at all. That does not mean they don't have some experience with it. It means that they haven't really figured out how to handle this. So this is all pretty disturbing. I mean, that was strike two. I thought that was pretty awful. I continued digging. I learned something, I'm sorry to say, even worse. It became strike three. I call it 5 years in limbo. Anyone whose property abuts the power lines is now on hold in their lives for at least 4 to 5 years. It's virtually impossible to sell your home, to get a loan, to do development. This is what the process that the PSC has put in place is doing to the Hudson Valley. Now you might ask, well, how come it's just the Hudson Valley? The reason is because in upstate New York and on the other side of the river, the corridors, those right-of-ways, are wider, they're broader. So it is possible for people to go inside those corridors, theoretically, a little more easily. On the other hand, the Hudson Valley is known for speaking up. Maybe the rest of them will wake up, we certainly hope so. So what we have is a situation in which the reason for this 5 years in limbo is the new process which the governor and the PSC put in place. I am sorry to be spitting at you with this thing. Put in place to do what they called, they wanted a competitive, comparative process. And what that meant was that they were going to ask for, in their first round of filings, solutions that were concepts, ideas, no plans. And I'm not kidding, there are no plans. These are ideas. But they at the same time asked to have lines drawn on a map so that it goes right through Pam Klein's driveway and it goes right behind everybody else's house. And they said it had to be above ground, and they said that it could stay close to, not in, the existing corridor. So this is, the applicants responded to what the PSC asked them to do. The applicants did what the PSC asked them to do. Now what happens is that when you have a line drawn on a map, every real estate agent in all of New York is paying attention to this, and they should be, because legally there has to be full disclosure. So what it means is that we have people, we have in Milan an absolutely remarkable family who has for 3 generations had their land chipped away by the regulated utility. Now there's this wonderful young couple who just moved back home. She is running the emergency rooms at the Vassar Brothers hospitals in Poughkeepsie. They have 2 young children. Her husband was within a week of breaking ground on a 10-acre plot of family land. They can't do anything. They are living with a serious problem. What we have is a situation where we're being held hostage for an unproven concept that might or might not solve an undefined problem for which there might or might not be an approved solution from the PSC. This is unacceptable. And it's time to take them out. Now, thank you. I will answer questions later.
Thank you, Marion. That brings us more or less up to date. There have been a few more recent developments, and these are just things over the past couple of weeks. And to bring us up to speed on those, we'd like to welcome environmental advocacy attorney for Scenic Hudson, Haley Carlock.
I want to start out just by thanking Ian and the Farmers and Families for Claverack and the Farmers and Families for Livingston, the town of Milan, Clinton Concerned Citizens, all of these municipalities and grassroots groups that have been formed in response to this, and to just see the crowd here today and the crowd that have been at the previous community meetings on this topic. It's truly inspiring, and all of you turning out and being so focused on this process is exactly why we're where we are today. As Marion described, while we might have preferred to not have seen these proposals in the first place, we've made an amazing amount of progress in just a couple of short months. Scenic Hudson, as well as the groups I just named and several others, municipalities including Dutchess County, some businesses that stand to be impacted, have formed a coalition with a purpose to ensure that these projects do not go forward unless there is a proven need and that there are not less detrimental alternatives to meet them. And if that is shown and a new transmission line must be installed, that New York State needs to show that it is a leader in energy policy, as it should be. And rather than building more 20th century transmission towers next to the ones that exist, doing the same old thing without improving and replacing the existing infrastructure, which is nearing the end of its useful life, it should instead embrace the latest and the greatest technology. It should ensure that any new power lines, if they are permitted to go forward, stay within the existing footprint. The right-of-way is not expanded. No new towers are built. And that where feasible, lines should be built underground. And I commend the Public Service Commission for now looking at this and whether it is feasible to put them underground for some of the way, for the whole way. It should at least be studied thoroughly and in-depth before we move forward. And certainly, there should be no exercise of eminent domain. And these groups have come together for these purposes, and we are coordinating our intervention in the Article 7 proceeding, which is the Public Service Commission proceeding, which is comparing these projects and ultimately possibly selecting one of these projects to permit to be constructed. And importantly, communicating within that process, such as the comments that you all are going to hopefully have a chance to enter into the Public Service Commission system at the end of this process, but also outside of the process. We've been able to communicate directly with the governor's office, with the chair of the Public Service Commission, and through these communications, I think we've made some important gains in the very recent past. Some of you may have heard the governor in his State of the State address mention that he was going to ask the Public Service Commission to develop a new rule that would allow an accelerated and expedited process for new proposed transmission lines that remained entirely within existing right-of-ways, that is, in all three dimensions, in height, in length, and width. If nothing's expanded and it's all right there, you know, you're preferred and you get this accelerated process. And of course, what we all thought was, what does this mean to us in this proceeding that's already underway? And the answer, at least that we've been given to date, is that, well, the commission's got to implement a rule in order to make this happen. It's several months down the line. This is a very unique proceeding. So while the accelerated process won't apply to these proceedings, the good news is that the governor's expressed policy preference for projects that remain entirely within existing rights-of-ways, no eminent domain, you know, no expansion of the current right-of-ways, should be preferred. And you know, our next question, of course, is, well, how is that going to be implemented in this proceeding, where we see at least 3 of the 4 applicants clearly are not abiding by that preference. And to its credit, we've seen the Public Service Commission come out and say, we're going to take a pause in this proceeding, and we're going to think about how that preference can be expressed in this proceeding, and whether the process should be modified in some way, whether the applicant should be given a chance to kind of go back to the drawing board and see if they can come up with a more innovative solution that would fit in with that policy preference. And we're going to think about this and come back to you with an answer, hopefully, in February. And to the same token, we who are participating in this comparative proceeding have a bit of a hiatus in submitting our scoping comments. The administrative law judges have said, well, hey, if we're going to go back and reimagine these proposals, then certainly we shouldn't be commenting on proposals that may very well, and I think that we all hope they would, significantly change in the future. And all of these gains are in no small part due to all the activism of all of the members of our coalition and all of the people like you. You know, the Public Service Commission was bombarded with phone calls and emails, and people with, you know, very intelligent and knowledgeable thoughts and questions coming at them. The whole thing probably would have gone a lot smoother in the eyes of the applicants and of the governor, but without having all of the concerns of the people heard. And the good news is that there are plenty of opportunities to still make your voice heard. And while we've made a lot of gains, there's still a lot more to be done. And we need to keep up the pressure. We need to keep up the pressure within the Article 7 proceeding, comments to the PSC, letters, calling the governor, in the media. We can't let this fade away because there is a good thing happening, a pause in the process to really think about the way to do this best. But we can't let this fade from the consciousness of these communities that are right now so engaged. We need to keep that up and keep the pressure on so that we ensure that the best thing for New York State and for the Hudson Valley happens in the end. Thank you.
Thank you, Dana. Okay, this has been a lot of information in a relatively short period of time. Our next guest always does a great job of distilling things down and explaining how it relates and what we can do next. Will Yandick is a 4th generation farmer in the town of Livingston. He's on the Livingston Town Board. He also happens to have a high voltage power line running through the middle of his family farm. And we're going to hear from him now. Will Yandick.
First of all, I'd like to thank the Churchtown Fire Company for getting this space ready for us. It's actually not easy to get more than a few hundred people together in this county. So it's a great space, and we think that you've done a great job. My name is Will, and I do come to you as a farmer and a 4th generation Hudson Valley resident. And many of you were at the last meeting that we held in Livingston. I'd like to congratulate Claverack for forming a group as well. 2 months have passed since our last organizational meeting, and many of you are likely thinking, okay, what's new, what's changed, where are we now? Since we've learned about these transmission projects, we've had to organize very quickly. And as you've heard, a new coalition is forming up and down the Hudson River, a coalition of landowners, concerned residents, lawmakers, and others who've joined together. This opposition is growing both in numbers and in diversity. We're united, as you've seen tonight, across political backgrounds, in communities up and down the river, upstate as well as downstate. We've had some successes. Our voices have risen up to the governor's office, who again, as you've been told, took time in his State of the State address to say very clearly to the Public Service Commission and to the utilities that the preferred solution is no more land and towers that are no higher or wider. So in light of this, some of you might ask the question, why do we still have to have meetings like this? Why do we still have to write letters to our lawmakers and get the ears of our lawmakers, and write letters to the Public Service Commission, and take a valuable day out of our Saturday afternoon when it's snowing outside to come to a place like this? A few things stand out that make our involvement now more important than ever. And although we have the governor's remarks, we have the media's attention, we have the ears of our lawmakers, we still do not have a guarantee that these projects will not seize our land. What we have are comments from Audrey Zibelman, the commissioner of the PSC, that says she would like to see a project that doesn't require eminent domain. And then when our groups call up utilities such as National Grid, we hear phrases such as, yeah, we're 80% sure that we're going to have a project that's not going to require your land. And we are here today to simply say that these statements are not good enough. We're here to draw a red line in front of eminent domain and call upon the Public Service Commission now, before any project is chosen, to state publicly that they will not choose a bid that requires even one more acre of new land. It is the Public Service Commission, public, and it's time that it lives up to that word and heed the wishes of the people that are here and throughout the valley and the governor who appointed them. Eminent domain is simply not necessary to deliver this power. And it's time we once and for all remove it from the table and expose it for the self-interested land grab that it is. And once we've settled that issue, once we can agree with that and bring the temperature down, we can sit down a little more calmly and talk about the real solutions to this energy problem. Okay? Now, the Public Service Commission has said that even if congestion pricing goes down, in other words, even if we can prove that this project is not needed, and that is a very real question still on the table, and even if the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission does not tax or force us to build new lines, the Public Service Commission then says to us, well, we've still got some old technology and old lines and old towers that are going to need to be replaced. I mean, some of the lines that run on my farm are literally from the 30s and 40s, and they're getting old. So we say to this very simply, if we the ratepayers are the ones that have to finance the infrastructure that the utility companies make money off of, then I'm sorry, I think we should have a say in the technology being used. Not eminent domain, let's talk about the kinds of technology that we can all be proud of. Let's talk about high composite lines manufactured by the company 3M that can carry a greater capacity on the same lines with the same towers. Let's look seriously, not just paying lip service to, but looking seriously at the cost of burying lines underground. Now look, we all know it. Burying lines underground are going to be more expensive. But again, it is you and it is me, the ratepayers, that will be paying for these upgrades. And ladies and gentlemen, we don't just live anywhere. We live in New York State, adjacent to New York City, the largest metropolitan region in the United States of America. There are tens of millions of ratepayers, hundreds of thousands of kilowatt hours, And so what initially looks like a staggeringly large and expensive project spread over that many ratepayers could be pennies on utility bills. So the limits to this solution, they're not technological, and they are not even economic. The limits are simply a matter of political will. Now, if I were a New Yorker, I would pay a few more pennies on my bill to bury lines to be more resilient to storm damage and other outages. In fact, most ratepayers already pay a storm fee that's rolled into their bill that the utilities are happy to pocket when skies are clear. They don't tell you this, but why don't we use some of that money to upgrade the system? If I were a New Yorker, upstate or downstate, I'd also be more inclined to pay a few pennies for a system that's harder for terrorists to attack, and one that does not mar this beautiful Hudson River Valley, which is one of the most culturally significant regions in our country. And one in which, we talk about upstate and downstate all the time, is a region in which many downstate residents are moving in for second homes, to build businesses, to visit on vacations, generating millions of dollars for the state as well. And so, to the governor, we say very simply, stay involved. Your remarks in your State of the State address have set a new standard for what impact should be, and frankly, we thank you for that. However, your words are meaningless if the utility companies are allowed to ignore them. This is your energy highway plan. The buck stops with you, and it's ultimately your responsibility to make sure that this is done right. You appoint the Public Service Commission. And I'm sorry, all this talk of independence, under the realities of Albany politics, the Public Service Commission will do what you direct them to do.
Yeah.
And to National Grid, Central Hudson, the other large utilities, we ask you to save the money that you spend on lobbying and on public relation materials that frankly confuse more than inform, and instead take a fresh look at the technologies that we're talking about. Do this the right way with our money, and abandon completely, without question or equivocation, any scheme that involves eminent domain. We are not giving up our land for you to acquire a new asset for your books. And lastly, for those of us here today and those listening, please make your voices heard in print to the governor and to the Public Service Commission, not because it feels good, but because it is necessary and because it is working. Now, it's a sad truth that the best in us often emerges only when we have to encounter a threat. But unfortunately, this is the real democracy, the hard democracy, the kind of democracy that continues long after you've turned a lever or darkened a circle in the voter booth, the hard work of keeping our elected and our appointed officials accountable. This is the real power of our state. It's the one that keeps me going, keeps me optimistic, and the one that keeps me confident that we're going to deliver a solution that we can all get behind in the end. So thank you for coming, especially in this snowy day. Please send your comments to PSC, and Ian is going to tell you how to do that at the end of this meeting. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Will. That gave me a few comments I'd like to make to the PSC as well. We're going to open the floor for a quick Q&A. I just want to emphasize that as soon as this Q&A is over, we have 5 or 6 helpers back there with index cards who are going to be helping you have your voice heard. Whatever comment you'd like to make, whatever the content is, whatever the subject matter is, we'll take it down. The PSC website happens to be down for maintenance today. But we planned a way around that. We have 300 index cards, and we have 5 or 6 helpers who will write your comments down, and we'll go ahead and log those in for you as soon as that website comes back online. So can we have our Q&A panel come up, and I'll introduce some of the new faces as they're seated. Marion, Haley, and Will, you've heard from before. This is Greg Quinn, who's the chair of Clinton Concerned Citizens. And we'd also like to welcome up Pam Klein, who's the leader of Farmers and Families for Livingston, and who's been a huge inspiration to all of us and continues to work tirelessly on this. So we thank her for her participation as well. Man back there. Okay, we can get started. I'm going to stand here and moderate a little bit. These four, potentially five, will answer any questions you have. So feel free, raise your hand, and we'll take one from you. Over here. Yeah.
Hello. It's very inspiring that so many people are here on such a snow day. I have two comments. The first comment is that one of the hazards of the power lines that I haven't heard people mention is the massive amounts of herbicides that the power utility lines lay on the ground every year to keep their power lines going. So the amount, if they can expand the amount of herbicides that prevent people from gardening organically, will be greatly impacted if this grows. My other comment is one I made at the Livingston meeting, which is that I think everyone here should get in touch with the national elected officials, and I will ask the lawyer about this, because my understanding of the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which is a treaty with mostly Asian countries that the Obama administration wants to fast track and which the Republicans are all for, are going to take away the right of communities such as this to stop any foreign corporation from anything that will affect their profits. That in a sense, what we're doing now, if this treaty passes, we will no longer have any power to stop corporate profits. The only power we will have is if we will pay the corporation what they say they would get. But if there is a plant project like a power line expansion, that environmental rules stop. If this treaty is signed, we will no longer be able to stop it because it'll be economically impossible. So I'm asking the attorney what she thinks. If we don't keep Congress from allowing this treaty to get signed, what we're doing now will be irrelevant. Is my understanding correct?
I will be the first to say that I don't know a lot about that treaty. There probably are people here who know more than me about it, but it's my understanding that in New York State, with its power that is produced and transmitted within New York State, there is still a large amount of local control, and my understanding is that it won't completely be usurped, but again, I haven't read the treaty from beginning to end, and I'm not an expert on it.
We have a question here.
Yeah, first of all, I want to thank the town board for Claverack, Churchtown Firehouse. My name is John Perica, by the way. I'm the supervisor in Greenport. We're going to be passing a resolution on December 5th. Actually, the resolution, the reason why I'm here is because Pam Klein's coming on the 4th to address the board, and we want to make sure our resolution is definitely on line with what I've heard today. So we want to make sure we're, crossing our T's and dotting our I's. And again, getting back to the Churchtown Firehouse, keeping us in the holiday season with the tree, snow, what more can you ask for? Anyway, getting on with what I heard was technology. I've got in my hand a wireless mic. We never had this how many years ago, now we've got wireless mics. Technology. I thought about this in a lot of ways, and a lot of people here probably know about my proposal for the airport, and without this eminent domain that we're all talking about, we can reduce that runway length and still meet that FAA's 1,000-foot runoff safety zone. But I want to go further with this, with technology. I want to talk real quickly about this underground and the emissions from these power lines. I was told, and I don't know if it's true or not, that you can actually take in, can anybody hear me? I don't know if this is kind of went off right now, I think. All right, that's technology. It'll turn off on you. Anyway, if you can hear me, I'm a loud talker anyway. But technology, I want to talk a little bit about the emissions coming from these power lines. I was told that you could take a fluorescent light bulb and stand underneath it. The thing would light up. And I don't know if that's true or not.
It is true.
I would also want to ask, I've been getting a lot of stuff to my attention as town supervisor from PSC. So I think it's Pamela Carter. What's this most recent tech thing? And I think I addressed Scenic Hudson that Scenic Hudson got some money. All right, before you get to that, I got one more. I want to add one more. Technology, talk about underground, burying it and going through people's properties and land use and farmers. What about, and I know I'm going to probably tick off some people when I bring this up, but when we think we have to think out of the box. There are a lot of elected officials out there. Again, I want to thank everybody here that's an elected official and everyone that spoke earlier. But what about under the river? Has anybody thought about putting this cable under the river? So I'd like to have that go back to the PSC to think about that technology. You know, you have these underground cables now feeding all kinds of exotic places that we vacation and feeding electric. You don't hear anything about that. So here we got technology with boundless energy going underground, and you got a direct route under the river, Hudson River. So I'm going to throw that out there. That's all I have to say, and I'd like to hear about that grant.
Sure. Scenic Hudson, as well as several of the other official interveners in the PSC proceeding, including the town of Milan, Clinton Concerned Citizens, and Farmers and Families for Livingston, applied for something that's available through the Public Service Commission, but the funding actually comes from the applicants. They're required to deposit funds in an account called intervener funding. And what this is actually a great tool that enables nonprofit organizations, municipalities, grassroots groups, concerned citizens to obtain funding for whether it's legal fees, whether it's to hire a technical expert in the area, to learn more about the proposals and to contribute to a more complete record in the proceedings. So one thing that the newly formed coalition is planning to do as the process moves forward, and once we find out what that's going to look like, is to try to get some funding through this fund to hire transmission engineers to do those studies. You know, if the applicants won't do them, if the commission won't do them, then we've got this route to obtain funding to hire experts to do the research. Can this be done underground? What is the cost? What are the environmental benefits? And so, you know, we were fortunate enough to obtain a little bit of funding to use early in the process, and intend on getting some more later on, hopefully, applying for it at least.
Thank you very much.
I want to add one thing. Everybody in this room can take advantage of intervenor funding. So this is not something that happens just for the town of Milan or Dutchess County or Scenic Hudson. Every single group and government group can file for money. Think of it as a grant.
Does anybody have any hard figures yet on what the cost of the above ground versus the underground is? Did the applicant put in any bids on it?
Yes, I can answer. The question was, do we have any hard numbers on cost from the applicants? In the filing that was done in October, they all came up with what I would call rough cost estimates. They're basically sales estimates. And they range anywhere from 300 million to 900 million. And what you should know is that there's no plans behind that for the most part, but the governor has said he's expecting to spend $1 billion for this particular thing. That's all I really know about them, but the numbers are, yes, the cost estimates are there, they're available online.
And when you're talking, whether it's 300 million or even $1 billion, that's like peanuts, isn't it? When, like Will said, it's spread over so many people, I mean,
That
to
is,
me, it's a
yeah,
no-brainer.
that is
You gotta
correct.
go-
And so the point is, that peanuts, that small peanuts, which leads us to say, well, gee, maybe it might cost a little bit more to go underground, so it's still peanuts.
Yeah, that's right.
Just a quick note about cost estimates. One of the persistent problems that all the groups have faced is finding independent cost analyses. When we applied for intervenor funds and tried to hire our own transmission engineer, we had found that most of the engineers that knew anything about transmission lines were already bought up and put on retainer months and months ago by the large utilities. We've had to actually go far out of state and engage with people in California. And we may actually have to talk to people in Europe, incidentally, where it is often national law, for example, in the Netherlands, that all new transmission projects must be buried underground. So again, these technologies do exist. Getting cost estimates has been elusively difficult because of the local situation that we're in, but that is one of the ways in which we are going to be working with Scenic Hudson to acquire the expertise out of state to help answer those questions. Just how much more expensive it is, and what is that cost exactly spread over New York's ratepayers over time.
I'd like to add one more thing too. You know, we're talking about many of the companies are coming out and saying it's too expensive. So let's talk about two ways to spend money. There's investment and there's expense. And there's a lot of examples, and I'm going to repeat myself what I said at the Livingston meeting, of the difference between the two. In 1906, when 80% of San Francisco was destroyed by an earthquake, within metaphorical minutes, architects and designers and engineers designed a new way to build buildings that were earthquake-resistant, buildings that swayed and moved. This was really expensive. Immediately after 9/11, the building codes in New York City, and it's now been adapted by every municipality in the United States, said that all new high-rise construction has to have stairways and stairwells that are wide enough so that firemen can run up and people can escape down at the same time. It wasn't done heretofore. And they said those stairways and stairwells must be encased in cement. Heretofore it was sheetrock. Really expensive. So what's expensive? These are investments, and putting this stuff underground and finding really good, smart ways to improve our Hudson Valley rather than to further destroy it. Perhaps expensive, but look at the entire cost.
Okay, so clearly we have a lot of noise in the back. That's actually good news. Those are people, I assume, discussing what we just talked about and working on their PSC comments. Just want to let everybody know, the way to have your voice heard, we have people with these index cards right there in the back. Go back and let them know what you want to say, or write down your comment and give that to them, and we'll make sure that that goes directly to the PSC. That process might make it not quite as efficient for questions and answers, so we may only be able to take one or two more very quick questions, give you the answers to those, and then let's all try to work on our comments. And we also urge everyone to sign up for all the mailing lists on the table, and to take one of these cards, list our websites and everything so you can keep up to date on the latest, which, as you've heard, changes from day to day. Do we have any very brief questions?
Why is it downstate required to generate more of its own electricity? There are acres of roof cottages without solar panels, with dozens of skyscrapers without grids, and there's ocean power available around New York City. And yet they don't seem to have to do anything.
Okay, the question was, why isn't New York City required to generate their power more locally?
It's a good question, and it's a question that the coalition, the newly formed coalition in the Hudson Valley here, is taking a look at. And one of the issues, and Marion spoke to this when she addressed us earlier, is do we actually need this power coming through the Hudson Valley? And it's a good question. We don't know that we actually do. And the answer, one of the many answers, may be to generate power closer to the point of usage, which of course is down below where we're talking about, And there's lots of what I believe to be viable alternatives. You mentioned a few of them. And I think it's a good point. I think it's an important question to ask.
There's one other addition to that. It's pretty well known on a dollars and cents basis that it's far more expensive to put in a transmission solution than to put in a generation solution. And so that is the generation, that we hear the chair of the PSC really wanting to pursue, and that is very good news for us. So Audrey Zibelman came in November, and that's one of the things that she wants to do, which is focus on this demand side. There are terms like microgrids and doing your own generation. So it's a great question, and the answer is, yeah, we really need to pay attention to it.
At this point in time, do you have any idea how the legislature in general, the whole picture, feels about this, or it's not too much of an issue with them, or whatever? Because I assume they'll have more influence on Cuomo than we will.
Well, I think it's a very good question. The question is, how does the legislature overall see this? I would guess that our elected officials could answer it, but what I would tell you is, I don't think the legislature overall is aware of this, outside of the Hudson Valley, number one. And number two, I read an interview with an existing legislator who basically said that all of us who oppose this don't know what we're talking about, and we're just a pain in the neck, stick in the neck. And so I would really like to address all of those legislators, my friend, because they do not have a clue.
It seems like a good place to leave it for the official questions and answers, but all of us will be in the room for as long as there are people here, so feel free to approach any of us and ask any questions. Thank you all for coming, and please leave a comment. Thank you.